this computer. Okay, we are recording. Let's see here. Oh, there it goes. Give me just a second as I find it.
And I think I got it to work now, so.
Okay, good. And okay. Copy. Always takes just a minute to get all this. What is today? August 11th. Tuesday. All right, I'm hitting go live. Says it's setting up our live meeting. Have you done very many of these, Sam?
Not Facebook Live. I feel like I'm on Zoom all day, every day. But I have not. So I know there's a lot of different ins and outs. And
Okay, are we going live? Let's see it yet. Hang on a second.
it says we are on Zoom.
Oh, yeah, it does. It says we are, but I don't see it live on Facebook. Oh, we are live now. Okay, good. I'm going to turn that off and see if I can get our comments here going. Okay, we are live. Yay. Okay. Welcome everybody to our regular weekly Tuesday talk, our Facebook Live. Most of you know I'm Marcia Ramirez, and we have Lisa Schmitz here, who's normally here with us. And we have a very special guest today, my dear friend, Samantha Owens Pyle.
Long name.
Long name. Okay. We're just going to call her Sam. Sam says, I asked her today, do you prefer Samantha? I never have asked her that. I hear people calling you both. So anyway, welcome, Sam. I'm so glad that you're here. Sam and I attend the same church, Sparrow Day, here in Nashville. And we have met through the women's group. And she actually leads our women's group, and she does a fantastic job. I started going to Sparrow Day about the summer of 2018. When did you start attending, Sam?
We checked it out a couple of times around August, September of 18. And then the first Sunday of December is when we this is where we need to be. But we had gone to Hope Park prior to that.
Oh, I didn't know you were at Hope Park.
Yeah, so we had gone there for, I started probably in 03 or 04 before David Perez. And then we went off and on and, just living across town. It was difficult to go every week. We were in College Grove and it was in Bellevue.
But that's a long drive.
Yeah. So once David Perez started Sparrow Day and we knew it was in town, it was closer, so we checked it out a couple of times and then just completely aligned with the new direction he was going, and it was really what we were searching for. So December of 18 officially.
That's awesome. Yeah.
What is the meaning of the name of the church?
Sparrow Day?
Yeah.
Simply, sorry, say no, trust God.
Okay.
Yeah.
Marcia sent me one of the, was that one of your Sunday services that you sent me to listen to?
Yes.
And I should have looked it up then. I was curious, but yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
I loved that, by the way.
Yeah, it's good. Was it the living in the waiting?
Yes. Yeah.
Which was one of our services a while back. And of course, all church services have had to take a completely different, approach to church because of the the pandemic. But although I had started going, I think we only started the women's group. They decided to like officially, I think we started with a book club, right? Was it that?
We had Present Over Perfect.
That's right.
That we went through and processed together that book and podcasts and readings from her. And then I meant to look the other day. I think it was around August, maybe September, that coming out of the book club, I asked Liz Perez, who is our pastor's wife, who's a therapist and amazing, if she would consider us doing anything more established to support women within the church, because they're so supportive of women serving in leadership roles, and some of our elders are women as well. And she was, I can't believe you asked me this, because I was going to ask you if you would consider it. So we're at a year roughly now. Yeah, and we were meeting every other week. And then in March, when everything hit, the last Sunday that church met, we all met, so March 8th. And then I think we missed just that next week because we weren't scheduled. And then within the next, I asked if anyone wanted to meet via Zoom, and we did. And then we were like, why not meet weekly? Why are we skipping a week? So we've met weekly other than 2 holidays, I guess, maybe, since then. So it's been amazing. And on the topic of self-care, has been an amazing self-care thing to do.
It has, like, all the women say that too. And it's interesting because we have really gotten to be a close and tight-knit group online, like closer than we were when we were meeting every other week at church. And of course we were still getting to know one another. But I think maybe it's just that constant of every week seeing each other, checking in. We talk about it all the time. I mean, friendships take work, they take intentionality. And so just under Sam's leadership of her keeping us connected every Sunday morning, and her devotion to the group, and her time and attention that she takes in finding something for us all to listen to and discuss together. And sometimes we don't get to the podcast. Sometimes we'll do a check-in, and sometimes we just are checking in with one another and we don't actually even get there. But whatever the Spirit leads us to happen in the group, Sam just rolls with it beautifully. And it's really, I've had some really sweet surprise friendships out of this. And it's been really, really an important thing in my life in these last. So thanks, Sam. You've just been great. Has your church been able to keep a women's group together at all, Lisa?
No, in fact, our church has had typically like bi-monthly women's gatherings. And once all this hit, I think we were due to have one like 2 months after everything shut down. And of course that was canceled. And they did have their first get together this past week. It was either last week or week before. I wasn't able to go. It was the week I had 2 weddings. I wasn't able to go because I was working the whole weekend. But no, that's something I kind of wish we had. Our church is very small. And so it's kind of like herding cats sometimes to get everybody on the same page to get involved in something that organized. Usually we do more all-inclusive gatherings. So it's everybody. So yeah, but I did want to say though, what you are doing, Sam, reminds me of my mentoring group that I had. I think it's been 7 years now since that group started, and we're not doing what we were doing when we were an organized group and part of an organization. But for 4 years, every Wednesday night, I had them on a Zoom call, and it was 6 young ladies, and it's a faith-based mentoring organization that puts seasoned professionals with young people who are up and coming and, not far out of school, learning how to navigate life and all that. And we did the same thing. I would find either a book to read, all of us read together, a podcast to listen to, shoot out some questions before we gathered together. And then we would all talk about it for an hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes. And then there were those times that it just didn't feel right to talk about what we were supposed to talk about. Either one of the young ladies had something traumatic happen in their life that week, and we really needed to just pause and focus on that person for that call. And then I remember very vividly one that had a pretty significant loss, very sudden loss. We just did nothing but pray the whole time that we were on for her. So yeah, Marcia, I know you must absolutely love it with leadership from Sam. And you do create these really strong friendships. 7 years later, I'm still really good friends with all of these young ladies, even though we don't do our weekly call anymore. So.
Well, I mean, it's wonderful to hear you say that. And it's wonderful to hear, Marcia, you say that you enjoy it so much, because I get more, I think, out of it than they do.
I said that all the time. I still do. I felt like I got way more than any of them. So I was selfishly, yes.
Selfishly, I mean, especially since we've gone virtual and we've met weekly and connected, as Marcia said, there's been surprise friendships. There's not a day now, I'd say over the past 2 months, that I don't hear from someone in the group.
Yeah.
Super cool. Whether it's an email, a text, a phone call, Monday through Saturday, and then we're all together Sunday morning. And it's just been amazing, because I've shared this with Marcia. I was never a part of a women's group. And actually I shared it on a service recently that I was never even part of a group, much less leading one before Sparrow Day. Never had the opportunity. I'm in professional organizations with women, and but I've never been active in a church in that way. I've always just gone and sat in the back row.
Yeah.
Now we sit up front at Sparrow Day when we can meet in person, and to be part of this group has been amazing. But it's been the cornerstone of just self-care through this, because so many different friends and friend groups, you know how we all have different groups of acquaintances and close friends, and everybody's dealing with this obviously at the same time, but they're dealing with so many different things, from losing jobs to homeschooling their kids to leading virtual classrooms. So we're all in different places, and if you don't commit to having time together, you're not going to have it. And I tell this every Sunday morning, they are the women, and we could vary from 10 of us to 20 of us on the call, and there's 36 who get the emails.
Wow.
Thinking about them and can listen to the podcast without joining. And they are who I've processed COVID and everything that's going on with. I mean, they are who I talk to and really get vulnerable with, and we all share so much. So it's turned into really amazing self-care for me.
Yeah.
Just from having friendships that, you can count on, and they're going through the same thing.
I was leading that group when I went through the conscious decision to leave corporate America, and had some pretty difficult corporate experiences where our organization was, I was an HR executive, so you can only imagine the stuff I had to deal with. But I worked for a president that was, I'll just leave it at that. That was where most of my issues came from. And so the decision was hard. I'd been there 12 years, and they were there to listen to me process all of that. And then now on the flip side of it, that a few of them have come back to me and said, because I still coach them and I still mentor them just very casually. But I've had a couple that have come back and said, okay, I've got this situation now. This is similar to what you went through. Can we go through this again? Can you tell me the story again? How did you handle it? What did you say? All that. So, yeah, it was a really meaningful experience. And they were all over. I had one in Tennessee, one in Michigan, and some here. So it was virtual the whole time, way back when virtual wasn't really what everybody was doing. So
we talk a lot about, part of good self-care is surrounding yourself with a good, solid friendship circle. I mean, it's really important for a woman to be happy, healthy, whole, is to have that friendship circle, people she can turn to in times of crisis or celebrate with in times of joy. And So, and I also talk a lot about how important diversity in our friendships is. And that's one thing I love about our little group is we have all ages. I mean, I think some of the girls are in their 20s, and then we probably have women up through their 60s.
That's fantastic.
I would
And
say every decade, for sure.
every decade, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so cool just to see everyone's different perspectives and inputs and support of one another, no matter where they are in life. And so, yeah, it's been a really, really cool thing. But I was saying last week that, I mean, sometimes, I don't know how, Sam, I don't know how you find all these great podcasts. I mean, sometimes it's a Super Soul Oprah podcast, or it can be all over the map. I mean, you must listen to podcasts daily. Do you listen to podcasts every day?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's part of my self-care routine is every morning. I get up at 5:30. I realized pretty early with COVID that even though I have a marketing agency and we've been remote since March 11th, and we made the choice to stay virtual. So we gave up our office space and we're doing this thing working from home. And so I'm on Zoom a lot, but I realized I've got to keep that same schedule as if I was leaving the house. So I get up and walk the dogs, and the first thing I do is put in my wireless earbuds and find the podcast. So while they're kind of getting their excitement out before I get them leashed up and ready to roll, I'm finding what am I listening to this morning. And I just, whether it's Nikki Eisenhower with, actually the podcast we're talking about today with what to do when you don't know what to do. She has an amazing podcast. Oprah, I'm one of her biggest fans. I adore her. So I started listening to Super Soul before the women's group even started. And I think we listened to her for 10 weeks before we listened to anything else. Brene Brown and Locking Us. I listen to a lot of different podcasts. Armchair Expert, Smartless, which is a new Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, almost said Will Ferrell. Podcast and Sean Hayes, which is hilarious. So
I bet that's hilarious.
Oh, good. They're in their third or fourth week. Seth Rogen was this week. It's a really good, funny podcast. So sometimes I'm listening things just to get my mind away from seriousness, but I listen to a lot of professional podcasts as well. But for our class, I'm thinking about and researching self-care, mindfulness, staying healthy during a pandemic, dealing with relationships, dealing with other women in our lives, empowering women, dealing with a significant other, dealing with being in quarantine. I mean, it runs across the board. And I just research a topic and see what comes up. And those that I mentioned are a lot of podcasts that I always go back to because they seem to be talking about those things. But also I think about, what was talked about the week before. I keep a little notebook that I've showed you guys, and I take notes. I take notice on everyone who attends, and if they note they're going through something or if they seemed quiet, I note that. And then some of the topics or comments that are made, I go back and think about, like, I think we really need to think about, how to truly practice self-care, or when we listen to what to do when you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
The 11 tips, it was literally, we were coming off of quite a crazy couple of weeks. We had a member lose a father, a member lose a son, job loss, a member, dealing with COVID, your husband with COVID. There were so many major things happening. And I literally was at a loss of, do I listen to something? I listened to probably 4 podcasts on grieving the loss of normal life, grieving the loss of a loved one, and nothing felt right. And then I literally came across that title of what to do when you don't know what to do. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. So let's just listen to this. And the 11 tips were so simple, but it was just like amazing reminders, like walk, move forward, exercise, sleep on it.
Yeah. I actually made notes of every single one of those tips, of all 11 of the tips. And I do want to say real quick, I'm going to say hi to everybody that's coming on. We haven't been keeping up, but there's a bunch of people on. Hey, everybody: Kathy, Julie, Britt, Marianne, Christy, Candy, Michelle. I see Sally. I see you and Marty are watching together. That's great. And Jenny. So welcome, you guys. And if you have anything, please jump in on the comments if you have anything to add with us today. I'm trying to watch it down here. But we're going to go, so the podcast we're referring to is called Emotional Badass. And it's Nikki Eisenhower she's a therapist. Mm-hmm. And she talks a lot about people that are highly sensitive people. I don't know if she's probably an HSP, and maybe that's why she got into therapy. But even if you're not a highly sensitive person, you can learn a lot from all these tips. And
because if you're not dealing with one,
you what?
Not one.
You're dealing with one.
Yeah.
Literally, I am a highly sensitive person, but I know my husband is not, and he is dealing with me. So
I'm trying to decide if I am. I think I might be, but I'm not really. I've been doing a little bit of research about that. Sometimes I look at, when they describe one, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. And then I think it's the other things that I'm like not sure I am. But I definitely related to this podcast. So there's a couple too. I actually am going to link a couple of podcasts on the notes above this when we get done.
And Marcia, do you mind getting her list? Like I want in your head, Sam. I want your list of podcasts, because I do the same thing. So I feel like I would really appreciate the ones that you've listened to. So
I will definitely get some podcast tips from Sam, and I will attach that in the notes above that when we're done here too. So
awesome.
Great. But one of the 11 things you touched on it right from the start was like exercise. And I thought it was interesting when she was talking about how just walking, actually there's been studies that show just that forward motion. Like if you can't have any emotional forward motion, if you feel like you're stuck, if you feel like you can't move forward with a decision or something, that actually just the movement of your body of going forward actually gives you some sort of mental relief from that. Makes you feel like you're doing something even when you feel stuck.
I loved that too.
And being out in nature, and whether it's hot or cold or whatever the weather is, I think it's just, we all talk about hiking and getting away, but literally starting my day every morning with a walk that is purposeful because I have my dogs, but it's also, again, time to listen to a podcast, but it's also time, if you need to shut off and not hear anything and not take any calls. And it's almost like that time in the shower where you can be mindful. It's that out of the 11 is probably the biggest one for me, with whether it's walking, yoga, any sort of just move your body, move it forward. I think changes your mental outlook as well as your just physical energy that you have.
And you just touched on another one of these, which it says, give yourself permission to take your mind off of it. Like sometimes we sit there and think about everything, we're in such a, overstimulated situation with so much news hitting at us, and everyone wants to talk about it. And even if you just get on social media and you want to break and see what everybody's doing, they're talking about it. So like everyone is either talking about COVID or politics or, something that's going to be polarizing. And it says, give yourself permission to take a break from trying to figure out whatever it is, whatever you're thinking about, whatever you feel like, decision you're trying to make at the time. If we just constantly chew on a problem, sometimes that keeps us stuck even more on it. Have y'all ever felt that before?
Yeah, I've had a lot of really milestone decisions that have come more easily once I quit focusing on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's almost like the light bulb comes on when you
Interesting.
turn everything else off.
Yeah, completely. Um, one of her tips is reach for counseling. And I'm a big believer in, I have a therapist who's amazing.
Yep.
We didn't start early enough in life. I didn't even think that was something that I needed until I started processing. I definitely have anxiety that has to be dealt with. And that's why I first started going, but then realizing things from your past that you need to process. And, we have focused a lot on shame within our group as well, probably more so early on because we were coming out of some Brene Brown studies. And obviously we all know she is the queen of helping us all deal with shame, vulnerability, being vulnerable and being active. But that has definitely been a supporting element of my life. And I think self-care that is 1,000% worth every dollar you spend on that. Like, don't feel like, oh, I shouldn't go do this, or I shouldn't take this hour. Because it's definitely been a great balance of when you need to dig deep into something that you're dealing with. So obviously she's a therapist and she's going to include that in her list, but I believe wholeheartedly in that being a huge part of self-care.
Same here. Marcia and I've talked a lot about that.
Yeah, I'm actually going to also put a link in the notes too. There's a website called betterhelp.com. And it's online and affordable counseling. I know a lot of people say I can't afford counseling, or I don't want to get out in COVID and go see someone, or I don't know where to start to find something. But I'm putting a link to that too. So if anyone's out there and they're like, man, I really would like to find a therapist and I don't know where to start, this might be a good resource for you.
And I'm glad you said that because I've heard about it. And then this week, actually, today's Tuesday, right? Yesterday on SmartList, one of their sponsors this week was BetterHelp. And it's saying Better Health, and that's what you would expect to hear.
I know. Then it came out of my mouth for BetterHelp, HELP.com.
But I think especially now, and like you said, it's affordable, but also they noted that if you're paired with someone, you answer some questions to get paired with your therapist.
Right.
And if you don't feel that this is great, I don't have this, connection, you can switch for free. So my therapist is actually here in Nashville, but we've been meeting via Zoom because I've been nervous about getting out. And so we've been connecting online, but I've always kept in the back of my mind that if someone's struggling with something, and that BetterHelp would be an amazing resource for them. I love that that's growing in such a time like this.
Yeah, I have another couple of friends that had been going in to see therapists for a while and switched, and they're on Zoom now, and they say it works. I don't know if they love it as much, but at least it's something to get some help with. I think it's the main thing is just gathering perspective from someone that's trusted and also maybe has a little bit of a depth away from your problem. When we try to ask our husbands or our friends and they're so close to us, they may not be able to give us the same perspective as someone outside of our inner circle. Right? And so I think it's really, really helpful.
That was the big thing with when I started going to one many years ago, was that it was that perspective that wasn't from someone close to me. And they could pick out all of the things that I couldn't. It's almost like, you can't see the forest for the trees. Well, they can see the trees because they've gotten all the data from you. They know where you are. They know where you're coming from. And one of the things she said in that podcast too was that even as counselors, we all have junk too, but we've been trained and learned how to step away from our own in order to help other people get through theirs too. So I thought that was a good point to make from a therapist perspective.
Yeah. I was just seeing a couple of comments on here. Kathy Stanley says, I walk every morning and that's my prayer time. It's funny, I pray with the Lord's Prayer as my pattern, and I've noticed that I'm often in the same physical places when I'm talking to God about certain things. Just being in his creation puts me in tune with my creator. It may sound weird, but it keeps me from talking to myself instead of to God. That's pretty cool.
I love that.
Yeah.
Something I've shared with the group that's off of that is, if you have something that's weighing on your mind, especially if it involves a person, if you see yourself revisiting it in your head and thinking through it, and especially if it's a negative thing, which typically if we're keeping something on our hearts, it's not a positive thing, it's not happy, and let's share it. And my therapist actually told me that when you see yourself getting in that rut of thinking negative or processing or assuming, imagining, another podcast that she's done recently on imagination, imagining the worst, imagining the negative, to just stop and pray for that person. Just stop the thought, stop processing, this is why they haven't gotten back with me, or this is why they did this, it's all, you're focusing on yourself then when you're thinking that way. And he said, just stop the process, step away from it for a second, and then pray for them, because you're not going to pray negative, so then you start thinking positively about this person, or at least get them help to deal with this. And that has been amazing, because I'll feel my head going down that rabbit trail of just, going over that same thing, getting nowhere. It's not helping me. It's not helping anyone. And
so I had a similar situation. This wasn't about a person or a bad thing, but it was a couple of weeks ago when I had 2 weddings in one weekend. I'm a floral designer, so it was a pretty busy, hectic weekend. And the day I was supposed to go I set up on Friday and a Saturday, 2 different events. But on Friday was the craziest of the 2 days. And I had misplaced a ton of stuff in my studio room. And I was starting to get in that like panic, anxious, like, oh my gosh, I can't be late. I've got to find it, and it was just this like freak out moment. And I stopped and I just stood there and I said, okay, God, out loud. I said it out loud. I said, okay, God, you got to help me calm down. I'm going to take a few deep breaths. And then will you please just show me where those clippers are? Please just show me. And so I was in the process of doing something else, not related to the clippers. And I walked to this one corner of my studio to get that other thing, whatever it was. And there they were, laying by what I was looking for other than the clippers. And they were where I would have not even thought they would be. And so I stopped and looked up and said, thank you, God, for doing that. And so now every time something like that happens, I stop and I say, okay, God, show me where that XYZ thing is. And I kid you not, in the last week, there have been 5 occasions that I have done that. And within 5 minutes, I find what I'm looking for.
Interesting.
It's almost kind of freaked me out a little bit, because it's something so silly. I'm like looking for this gadget, but I kind of was like, okay, he's the only one that can help me, because nobody else is working in this studio but me. And if I can't find him, so yeah.
And it just resets your mind, no matter what you're letting your thoughts race about.
Yeah.
Prayer, as we all know, like we all talk about how you fall asleep as you're praying at night, because you just calm your body. And
right.
I don't know if I've ever gotten through my nighttime prayers. I mean, you seems to, it shouldn't always say always or never, but it feels like, you just calm your body and you relax.
Mm-hmm.
Like you calm yourself, and it's like, oh, I did come out of that room. They're probably right there.
Yeah.
It's him just calming your mind.
And that day it did that. Like I was really worked up, and I had one wedding back after all of this quarantine, but this was my first weekend that I had like so much in one weekend, and I was getting a little anxious. And no, I was getting a lot anxious actually. So it really did help calm me down. So by the time I got everything in the van and drove off, I was calm, and then everything went smoothly after that. But Yeah, sometimes we just let ourselves get so worked up and we think we can control our situation, but we can't. And taking that time to sit, recenter, breathe, and pray makes all the difference.
There's
1,000%.
some, yeah, she talks about that a lot too, in some of these other tips about, like, we don't need to have all the answers right now. Like, we can just calm down and not let the panic and the anxiety control our thinking with everything and feeling. We talked about a little bit last week about how it's really hard to sit in the unknown, to sit in the waiting and not know what's coming up. That is really hard for almost everyone. I don't know anyone that says, oh yeah, I just love not knowing what's happening.
Well, I think I mentioned Richard Rohr said in one of the podcasts I've listened to recently, he said, it's okay to not know.
Right.
It's okay to not know.
Sparrow Day, I mean, David Perez's very big message of mystery is great. It's fine that we don't know all the answers. Like, we're not going to say we know that our religion is 100% right and we know everything. Let's be okay in the mystery of God. Let's be okay in the mystery of anything happening around us. And again, you're right. We want control and we want to be able to say, I know what's happening. But I think this has proven to everyone that how many plans have we all canceled and changed. I mean, we were talking about this before we went live. I mean, literally big events that are now not happening for the first time in history, or happening without crowds, or, things from haircuts to trips didn't happen the next day.
Yeah.
And there's a quote by Oprah. It says, and I'm going to butcher it because I don't have it in front of me to read it. But in essence, she's saying every person who dies had plans the next day.
That's so true.
Yeah. Like, it's just, it puts it into perspective that we can plan all we want. And I hope we all, live to 100 years old and have this rich life. But I mean, I've had 2 people from my hometown die of COVID this week, 2 sisters. I had a guy that graduated before me, but was in our friend group, pass away Saturday night of a massive heart attack at 44.
Oh my gosh.
It's just, death is obviously inevitable and it's around us, but just the prevalence and the conversation that's continuing right now, it does build that anxiety. And the only way I can process is to step back from it and think, I'm okay with the mystery. I trust that there's a God and it's all going to be amazing. And I have to be okay that I don't know all the answers. And, we don't know why things happen. But we just have to trust that there's a reason and it's all going to be okay.
My grandfather was a Southern Baptist preacher. And when my grandmother died, she passed away 2 years before he did. And at her service, he said, she is where she lived her entire life to be.
Yep.
And that has stuck with me all these years, because this life is on earth is not what God wants for us. It's that eternal life that he wants for us. And so John, my husband's been doing these little Sunday morning 15-minute, it's not really a service. It's kind of like he picks a topic and pulls out scripture and talks about it and stuff. And he talked about death and how we shouldn't be afraid of death, and we shouldn't be afraid of that unknown, or the unknown of being on this earth and not knowing when that's going to happen for us. Like, we're not sick, we're healthy. Okay, I think I'm going to live another 40 years. Well, I may only live 2 more days. Mm-hmm. So, but not to be afraid of that. And what was interesting is he did that story, or that little thing on Facebook, and the day before I just had this weird thought, like, he owns his own business. I really think he needs to show me where all of his work stuff is and all of his client information and all that. Like, what if something happened to him? And then he goes and does that story, and I had no idea he was doing it. And so I'm like, okay, God, what are you trying to tell me right now? Not to be anxious about this, right? So, yeah.
Well, I think it was Richard Rohr or Eckhart Tolle was, we're not a body with a soul, we're a soul with a body.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to remind yourself of that to that we're here just for a little while, and some people are here longer than others. But to think of yourself as a soul is so freeing, and just the calm that comes across you that, yeah, it'll be okay, because I'm just in this body for a short time, and
Right.
it doesn't begin or end there.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a little quote that I wrote that Nikki said when she was talking about this unknown and learning to be okay with the unknown. And she was like, we don't need to have all the answers right now. And she said, so unless I'm on fire, having a heart attack, or about to get hit by a car, I don't need to have the solution right now.
I loved that.
So yeah, unless, yes, sometimes maybe we need to know what to do. Like if we're on fire, let's make a decision and figure it out really quick. But sometimes we can just sit with it, which is another one of her and she said sitting with it is not stressing over it. It doesn't mean sitting and stressing and overthinking and ruminating. That's not what sitting with it is. But learning to just sit with our feelings and acknowledge what they are. Last week, I think it was Tammy Starling made the decision. She goes, learning to understand the difference between our feelings and our thoughts. Mm. And how, our feelings are there for a reason, right? We don't want to ignore our feelings. So sitting with our feelings, and then I think Tammy said something like learning to ask ourselves, like, what are our feelings trying to tell us, or what do our feelings need from us right now? Like, what are they, what clues are they giving us? And being able to sit there and not run from them and be distracted from them, that's not easy to do. But the more I've learned to do that, the more I have learned that really helps center me.
Yeah, because I think during that part of the conversation, we all talked about this, that I think that if you do run from a negative feeling, that you're kind of, I'm Pollyanna, this is all going to be okay, toxic positivity, then it just runs rampant. But if you actually process, I am feeling anxious, or I'm feeling grief, I'm feeling sadness, I'm angry, you'll hear next week when we all listen to our podcast, which you might have already listened to it. I hadn't even told everyone, and she knew what we were going to be this week. Emotional Badass, her newest episode. But she talks about that, like with understanding and acknowledging anger and processing through it. So I think Tammy did a great job of bringing that up, that, dealing with a feeling and not just setting it to the side is a whole nother thing. We can have negative thoughts, yes, push them out, but a negative feeling needs to process and actually occur.
Right. And going back to counseling, I mean, they can help us through that, because you're like, okay, what's my feeling? Like, I'm mad. Okay, why are you mad? You start kind of like, okay, maybe it's because I'm scared. Maybe that's really what's going on. And then that's where you can really start making the difference in your world.
So, Marcia, can I interject real quick? So as I was listening to that this morning, and she was talking about processing those feelings and that emotion and getting it out somehow, like, if there's some physicality to that, like, you need to go like punch a punching bag, or, hit a pillow, and I can't remember the analogies she gave, but what stuck out so strongly in my mind was when I was going through my divorce years ago. This was when I worked for Dillard's Department Stores. I was a merchandiser. So we were in the store at 7:00 before the store opened, doing all the displays and stuff. And I was going through a terrible, terrible divorce. At the side of the metal compactor dumpster was a box of fluorescent bulbs that they had taken out of the ceiling, the ones that had gone out, and they had replaced them all. They did that super early in the morning. And so here's this box of bulbs that need to go into the dumpster. And I was like, oh my, this is going to be so fun. And they're the long, skinny ones, right? So I stood there chunking those things like javelins, and they would hit the metal at the end and just make the most glorious shattering noise you've ever heard in your life. I must have busted 20 bulbs, and the folks that I worked with were like, oh, she's having a little too much fun with those light bulbs. But it just helped me process that anger, and then it was gone, and it just felt so good. And then 2 days later, we come into work, and next to our office door is a box of fluorescent bulbs with a big marker writing on the side that says "For Lisa" with a big heart. So, but it felt so good to physically get it out. And then I was so much more calm afterwards. So
yeah, that was that was another one of it. Says sometimes you just need to lose it with a timer, with a limit. Like you need to just get in your car and scream for 5 minutes.
That's what it was. She said, yeah.
Anxiety is an energy. And they were talking about that with walking, that the walking helps you work out the energy of anxiety. But sometimes, just like, I don't know, throwing fluorescent light bulbs in the trunk.
Of course, it's against the law to do that now. You have to dispose of them properly. But yeah, maybe you could break some plates or something, Mm-hmm. Just don't hurt anybody or yourself.
I was just looking here, and it was I am posting, like I said, a link to this one, but I'm also posting a link to the one that our group talked about last week, which is still on that same podcast. It's a different episode, but it's talking about imagination and how really when our imaginations go wild. That phrase, I don't remember who brought that up last week, but it's really worry. Worry is when our imagination, you think of imagination as being a good creative thing, but it's really when our imaginations go crazy, that's when all of our worry can go crazy.
Yeah, it's I told you guys when I first read the title, I was just intrigued by like, what could she be talking about, and what would imagination have to do with mindfulness? And I don't get it. Like, you think of a child pretending and they have this amazing imagination, and you think of Dolly Parton imagination library. Like, it's just like, I don't know. I never thought of it in a negative way. And it was literally talking about the consciousness and the ability to shift your imagination, manifest positive. So if you're imagining a situation and it's a negative one, that's literally you're worrying and you're thinking about something that hasn't even happened, because obviously it's imagined. And until I listened to that podcast, I had never thought of it that way. I had only thought of imagination as a positive thing. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely made me, and I know it's only been a week since, learning this, and I love learning something new every day. So I think that's why I'm obsessed with listening to 4 or 5 podcasts a day right now. But it was so interesting to think about that and to shift it and to be able to turn your imagination. It was kind of, and I used that example of praying for someone that you're thinking negative of. So it's very similar. If you're imagining the worst, why can't you start to think about, well, what if this did work out? If we're getting overwhelmed from COVID, why don't you start imagining that this is going to make people kinder and make us safer? And, yes, it's going to change the way we can be in crowds, but maybe it'll be for the better. I mean, think about things that, good things that will come from this, things that aren't happening because of this that could turn into a positive. So it was really interesting. And like the whole group really got into it. And I feel like a lot of us had that aha moment of, man, I just thought worry was worry. I didn't think about, it was a negative form of imagination. And I mean, it all makes sense once you say it out loud and hear it. But it had never crossed my mind. I mean, I told you guys I'm from a long line of anxious worriers. And I mean, it kills me, but I bet my mom doesn't go 15 minutes without worrying about something. I bet she didn't go 5 minutes. And my dad's the opposite, who, without knowing what he's doing, he's turning, he's imagining a positive. So I just really consciously focus on that a lot. Like if I catch myself being anxious or worrying about something or feeling negative about something, it's like, how can I flip that and change it. So it was so nice to hear a therapist say, we all deal with that, and here's how you can process it and make it okay, especially in a time like this where you could worry yourself sick right now.
I think we all probably know someone that's doing that. I have a couple of friends that are doing that right now. So
yeah,
that are just imagining worst case scenario all the time. I know.
Yep.
I have a friend that does that too. I mean, they just always jump to worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And they're a very creative musician. You know, they have a creative, imaginative mind, but it's being used in the negative way right now. I can see that. But I never thought about it being your imagination. But it's definitely something that we can have some control over. If we get some help learning how to control it, we can't just snap our fingers. That's why doing all of these things to help try to keep us centered and grounded and in what's real and in the now, and not trying to live in the future that we don't know what it is. I think that's it's super, super important, especially right now when we're all facing such unknown. We don't know how long we're going to be in this pandemic. I heard somebody say yesterday that they heard someone say, well, they have good news. They think that we'll really be back to normal by the end of 21. And I said, what? That's good news.
Are you kidding?
What's the alternative?
I don't know what back to normal would be, but I mean, the truth is we don't know. And so we're going to have to learn how to try to live our best lives, as they say, within the constraints that we have right now. And like we said last week, we all know we're all spiritual ladies that are on here. Not all the same religions, but all spiritual. And we do believe that there is a greater power, a God that is still working in all of this mess that we're dealing with. But I do think we need to participate. We can't just sit back and go, okay, God's going to handle it, or God's going to heal me, or we have to actively do the things that we can do to make ourselves better, to make our situations better. He wants us to participate in our lives. And so hopefully some of the things we talked about today will help. Sorry, there's some more comments coming in. Oh, that's so funny. Did you get banished to your closet? Well,
I love that you're in your closet.
I asked her that a couple of weeks ago. She's like, this isn't my closet.
Well, it sort of is. It's a small bedroom that is sort of it's Marcia's world. I have clothes in closets in here, and it's my dressing area, but I also have a little desk in here, and I come back here, and it's just where I can be private. So yes, yes, it sort of is my closet.
I love it.
But the boys know when I'm back here to not bother me. Yeah, then there's a knock on the door. There better be a fire. So, man, Samantha, is there anything else that you want to leave us with today? You've just been so great to come and talk with us and share your heart.
One thing that I didn't share that, obviously being healthy right now in a time like this with your mind and your body is so important. And I know we talked about exercise, but I've had today, August 11th is like the total self-care day. I started off the day at Danny Williamson's office, and she's a functional medicine practitioner, and literally is just a game changer for me in clean eating and vitamins and supplements, and just helping so many things. I had Hashimoto's and lost my thyroid, and that's pretty well if you don't do anything about it, a game changer with your health, and definitely leads to anxiety and depression. And I think just adding that, yes, we can say walk, exercise, be mindful, but treating your body as it is something that we only have for a little while is also so important right now. So as you're thinking through those tips of, sitting with something, processing it, think about what the worry is doing to your body. Think about, if your go-to is to go to sugar or alcohol or whatever it is to process, and just keeping your body as healthy as you're trying to keep your mind healthy right now, focusing on that just as much as we focus on a women's group to connect and be vulnerable in and lean on, or a therapist to process what's going on. But also just, I feel like the more time that we all have more time to take that walk or do yoga or eat right instead of going the opposite direction. So I think just always keeping that in mind, that self-care is beyond the movement of the body or the processing of the mind, has really been something that I've had to remind myself of, and just using this time as a positive, that you can work on the multi levels and parts and pieces of self-care right now.
I love that. I love that. Because for me, I think at first it sort of felt like I was on vacation every day, and I was like having wine every night instead of just a couple of nights a week, and I was not exercising, and I was watching, and it started affecting me. I mean, I really could feel. And so it's like, okay, wait a minute. Maybe my work isn't the way it was, but I still need to approach life with some structure here, and taking care of yourself, and only eating Mexican food once a week.
That's not a problem.
I heard somebody say this morning that one of the reasons that we've all, or a lot of us, have processed this COVID 15 pounds or COVID 19 pounds, whatever it may be, it was COVID 10 for me, is sourdough bread recipes. And, all the baking and all that, but they specifically said sourdough. And I was like, that's why the grocery's been out of sourdough bread the last few times, like, making amazing grilled cheese sandwiches and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I have lost mine, by the way, Marcia.
You lost your what?
My COVID 10.
Oh, good for you.
I hit the 10 mark yesterday. I'm like, yay!
Good for you.
And I've been back to spinning with my husband 3 days a week. Sam, he's a teacher. So if I'm lazy and don't get up and go with him, he teases me. And I finally have gotten back in the habit of going. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, good.
Nordic Track, the competitor to the Peloton. So it's the same.
Oh, nice.
And now I use it more than him.
Oh, good.
No, I love it. But just things like that, like grab onto it and then get them interested in something that they'll purchase. And then,
yeah.
There you go.
And I started also, Marcia, I don't know if I told you this, I keep my bike at the studio, and our studio is 6 blocks from our house. And so I have been riding my bike home for lunch and then back. So just adding a couple of 20-minute bike ride, leisurely bike rides is moving and burning just a little bit more. So it's just adding that little bit extra, even if it's just 10 or 15 minutes a day.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we got to make good choices for ourselves, mentally, emotionally, and physically, and we'll feel better from it. We will. It'll make a difference. Thank you, Sam. We appreciate you spending the time with us. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I wasn't as good at looking at comments today, but we'll try to get better. And thanks, Lisa.
Yes. And Sam, great meeting you.
Nice to meet you.
This was great.
Nice to meet you. Enjoy Speed Week.
Yeah, I know. Indy 500 is going to be a different experience this year. So
yeah. And we hope to see everybody back next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, our special guest is Julie Maynard. She's one of our board of director girls. She's on the board of directors. She's a great singer. She's a mom. She's a great friend. We've been friends for years. And she's just a wise and trusted friend that I know is going to be really valuable to all of us next week. So y'all join us next week. Thanks again, Sam, Lisa. Love you guys.
Sam. Love you.
Have a great week, everybody. Bye, Britt. Bye, everybody.
Bye.